I want to have 2 more fights this year. Then after that, take off a little bit of time, maybe have a kid or something, and then come back to fight some more.
Becoming, it doesn't mean I'm not going to have time for the other kids, but it does mean that I have a new baby and I have to focus and give that baby my undivided.
Light-skinned girls who think they just so pretty, and just because they born light-skinned that they just all that they can come up with shit talk.
Gab is like my best friend. I talk to him about everything, and when like the time is right, people want details of how long we...
Y'all, this isn't just another celebrity love story. This is a slow burn emotional betrayal that allegedly destroyed a woman who thought she was building a future. Y'all thought Claressa Shields only fought battles in the ring? According to what she allegedly reveals, her most brutal fight happened behind closed doors with the man she wanted to marry. Sources say Claressa didn't fall for money, clout, or headlines. She fell for promises whispered in private. Promises about forever, about being the next chapter, about marriage. She allegedly believed Papoose wasn't just passing time, he was planning a life. But here's where the story turns dark. Allegedly, while Claressa was investing her heart, Papoose's loyalty was never exclusive. His heart, his attention, his priorities, they were already tied somewhere else. And Claressa? She was allegedly kept close, but never chosen. Insiders claim that when Remy Ma's chapter became unstable, Claressa wasn't loved, she was used. Used for image. Used for fame. Used for access. Used while being told she was the one. And the most painful part? Allegedly, Claressa stayed faithful while side chicks existed in the shadows. She asked questions. She demanded respect. And the moment she said no more, she was allegedly discarded. Sources say Papoose promised marriage, but never intended to deliver. Claressa reportedly put her focus, her finances, her future decisions on pause for love, only to realize she was never a priority, just an option. An emotional convenience. By the time she allegedly saw the truth, the damage was already done.
Quote time.
No, you gonna meet me over there. I'm walking here.
Yes, she did. More importantly, what'd you think about that knockdown?
I loved it, man. She melted like strawberry ice cream, man.
Of having his support, you know what I'm saying? His support is like very, very different from what I've had in the past, and how he speaks to me and stuff is very different. There you go. We deserve each other.
Buckle up. What you're about to hear isn't a fairy tale. It's an alleged emotional trial that plays out like testimony under oath, a story where love is questioned, motives are examined, and every promise is put on the stand. Sources say when Claressa Shields entered Papoose's orbit, her world was already heavy with discipline, sacrifice, and victory earned the hard way. She wasn't searching for headlines or a savior. According to people close to the situation, she was looking for something quieter, stability, understanding, and a future that felt real beyond the cameras. Allegedly, that's exactly what Papoose presented. Not loudly, not recklessly, but with words that sounded deliberate, measured, and safe. Insiders claim he spoke in certainty. Not dreams, not maybes. Claressa reportedly believed she wasn't being courted for a moment, she was being chosen for a lifetime. Marriage wasn't introduced as fantasy, sources say, it was framed as intention. And when someone who understands struggle hears intention, they listen differently. But this is where the tone of the room changes. Because while Claressa was allegedly being told she was the future, there was a past still occupying space. Multiple sources claim that Remy Ma was never truly out of the picture. Not emotionally. Not symbolically. And Claressa, according to those familiar, didn't know she had been seated in what would later feel like a waiting room. People close to Claressa allege that she was emotionally invested during a period when clarity was missing. She was allegedly reassured during moments of doubt, told to be patient, told that timing was the only obstacle. And patience, when mixed with hope, can be dangerous. As the story unfolds, whispers begin to surface. Allegedly, when things became unstable elsewhere, attention shifted. Not out of devotion, but convenience. That's what sources claim. Claressa, they say, was suddenly more present, more visible, more useful. Public moments multiplied. Conversations happened behind closed doors. And the narrative quietly changed from someday to soon. But soon never came. According to insiders, Claressa started noticing fractures, inconsistencies, silence where reassurance once lived. And then, the silence that followed was louder than any argument. According to sources familiar with the situation, Claressa Shields didn't immediately speak out because she was still trying to understand how something that felt so intentional could collapse so quietly. What appeared from the outside as distance was, allegedly, a period of internal reckoning. She was replaying conversations, promises, reassurances, trying to locate the exact moment where truth separated from performance. Those close to her say the emotional aftermath wasn't dramatic at first. It was heavy. Claressa reportedly questioned herself before she questioned him. She wondered if she had misunderstood, if she had expected too much, if patience had somehow turned into blindness. That internal negotiation, sources say, is what kept her silent while speculation filled the gaps. But behind the scenes, cracks were widening. Insiders allege that communication didn't just fade, it became selective. Messages went unanswered. Plans stayed unconfirmed. And when Claressa attempted to reestablish clarity, the responses she received were vague, delayed, or emotionally distant. What once felt like priority allegedly began to feel like inconvenience. This is where people close to the situation say Claressa started noticing a pattern. According to multiple accounts, moments of closeness only appeared when visibility or advantage was involved. Public settings brought warmth. Private conversations brought excuses. Claressa allegedly began to feel like she was being activated when useful and paused when not. That realization, sources claim, was more painful than any argument could have been. The alleged existence of other women didn't surface all at once. It emerged in fragments. Missed explanations. Conflicting timelines. Familiar names appearing where they shouldn't. And when Claressa finally confronted what she believed she was seeing, those close to her say she wasn't met with accountability, she was met with deflection. Sources allege that instead of reassurance, she was told she was overthinking. Instead of transparency, she was offered distance. And in that moment, Claressa reportedly understood that loyalty was not being protected, only managed. What followed, according to insiders, was not a dramatic breakup but a slow withdrawal. Emotional access was reduced. Support became conditional. And the promises that once felt solid allegedly became theoretical. Marriage, which had once been discussed with certainty, now existed only as something that might happen later. Later became never. People close to Claressa say this was the point where the emotional cost became undeniable. She had adjusted her life around a future that was no longer being acknowledged. Financial decisions, scheduling, long-term planning, all reportedly shaped by an expectation that was now being quietly abandoned. And still, she stayed longer than she should have. According to those who know her, Claressa stayed because she believed consistency would be rewarded. Because she believed integrity mattered. Because she believed that walking away without exhausting every effort would feel like surrender. That belief, sources say, is what made the eventual ending so devastating. When the separation finally happened, insiders claim it wasn't marked by closure. There was no final conversation that explained everything. No acknowledgement of harm. Just an emotional cutoff that left Claressa with unanswered questions and a sense that she had been edited out of a story she helped support. Friends allege that the realization hit in waves. First sadness, then confusion, then anger, and finally clarity. That clarity, according to those close to her, is what led Claressa to describe the relationship in terms that shocked people. Not because they were cruel, but because they were blunt. She allegedly framed the experience as one where her authenticity was leveraged, not valued. Where her devotion was welcomed, but not reciprocated. The word opportunist didn't come from nowhere, sources say. It came from reflection. From noticing how attention increased when her presence elevated perception and decreased when it didn't. From recognizing how emotional availability was expected from her, but not consistently returned. Insiders claim Claressa eventually reached a conclusion that shook her. That the relationship may have served a purpose for someone else long before it served her. That the future she was promised was never being built, only referenced. And once that realization settled in, silence no longer felt like protection. It felt like complicity. According to those familiar with her mindset, Claressa didn't speak out to punish. She spoke out to reclaim. To take ownership of a narrative that had quietly framed her as temporary. Her alleged statements weren't dramatic confessions. They were measured reflections that carried weight because they came from restraint, not impulse. The public reaction, sources say, was immediate. Supportive messages, disbelief, pushback, and scrutiny. Some questioned timing, some questioned intent. But those close to Claressa insist the motivation was simple. She was done carrying a story that wasn't hers to carry alone. What made this situation resonate, insiders claim, is that it wasn't about scandal for the sake of scandal. It was about imbalance. About how easily strength in one arena can be mistaken for invulnerability in another. Claressa could dominate a ring, but according to those close to her, she was unprepared for emotional ambiguity dressed as certainty. And perhaps the most haunting part of this alleged saga is not what was done, but what wasn't. The future that never arrived. The accountability that never came. The explanation that was never offered. As the story continues to circulate, observers are left with an uncomfortable question. Not whether love existed, but whether intention did. Whether the promises were ever meant to be fulfilled, or whether they were always meant to keep someone close just long enough. Those close to Claressa say she has moved forward with resolve, not bitterness. The sadness remains, but it no longer defines her. What defines her now, they claim, is clarity. The understanding that not every connection built on words is supported by action. And as this alleged case continues to unfold in the court of public opinion, one thing becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. Some relationships don't end because love disappears. They end because truth finally arrives. What followed was not an apology, not an explanation, but a shift in tone that people close to the situation say confirmed everything Claressa Shields had begun to suspect. According to those familiar, once the narrative slipped out of her control, the energy around her changed. Silence was no longer passive. It became strategic. Insiders claim Claressa noticed that her name was being avoided in certain circles while her presence was quietly erased from future plans. Invitations stopped. Conversations went cold. It was as if the relationship had never existed, despite the emotional and personal investment she allegedly made. That erasure, sources say, hurt more than any argument ever could. People close to Claressa allege that she began connecting dots she once ignored. Moments where she felt celebrated suddenly felt transactional in hindsight. Compliments now sounded like positioning. Support now felt conditional. The realization, according to those around her, was devastating but clarifying. This is where the courtroom tone intensifies. Because according to insiders, Claressa didn't just feel emotionally discarded, she felt strategically replaced. New faces appeared. Familiar patterns repeated. And the same promises she once believed were allegedly being recycled for others. Not because history was repeating itself accidentally, but because that pattern had allegedly worked before. Sources say Claressa reached a point where denial was no longer possible. She allegedly accepted that the love she thought was mutual may have been asymmetrical from the start. That while she was building something real, someone else was managing outcomes. And that realization broke her. Friends claim there were nights where Claressa questioned her own judgment more than his behavior. She reportedly asked herself how strength in one arena failed to protect her in another. How someone so disciplined, so focused, could still be blindsided by intention disguised as affection. But sadness eventually gave way to anger. Not explosive anger, not public rage, but a controlled, deliberate acknowledgement that what happened mattered. That silence had protected the wrong person long enough. According to insiders, Claressa didn't decide to speak because she wanted attention. She decided to speak because she wanted the record to reflect her truth. When she allegedly described the relationship as opportunistic, it wasn't said lightly. Those close to her say that word came after reflection, not reaction. After recognizing how timing always benefited someone else. How her value increased during moments of instability elsewhere. How her loyalty was welcomed without being matched. The public reaction, sources say, became divided. Some questioned why she stayed. Others questioned why she spoke. But those closest to her argue that these questions missed the point entirely. The point, they say, is not endurance. It's accountability. Because according to Claressa's alleged experience, she wasn't given informed consent. She wasn't told she was temporary. She wasn't told she was a fallback. She was told she was the future. And building your life around a future that never existed leaves damage that doesn't disappear quietly. Insiders claim Claressa also grappled with the idea that her success may have made her vulnerable. That being self-sufficient allowed others to justify taking without giving. That independence was mistaken for emotional resilience. And that's when the tragedy becomes clear. This wasn't about jealousy. It wasn't about competition. It wasn't about another woman. According to those close to the situation, it was about truth withheld. About promises made without intention. About emotional labor extracted without commitment. As the story continued circulating, more voices began reflecting on the pattern. Observers noted similarities between past narratives and current allegations. Not as proof, but as context. As a reminder that repetition often reveals design. Claressa, according to insiders, reached a final conclusion that reshaped everything. That the relationship didn't fail because love ended. It failed because honesty never fully existed. That she wasn't abandoned suddenly, she was phased out gradually once her role expired. That realization didn't bring peace immediately. It brought grief. Grief for the future she envisioned. Grief for the trust she extended. Grief for the version of herself that believed consistency guaranteed sincerity. Those close to her say this grief was quiet, private, and heavy. But grief eventually transformed into resolve. According to people in her circle, Claressa no longer frames herself as a victim. She frames herself as informed. She doesn't deny the love she felt. She denies the narrative that it was mutual. And that distinction, they say, is powerful. The final weight of this alleged saga lies not in scandal, but in its familiarity. Many recognize the dynamic. Many have lived it. Many have been promised permanence by someone who only needed proximity. And that's why this story resonates beyond celebrity. Because it asks an uncomfortable question. How often do people mistake access for affection? How often is stability exploited under the guise of romance? How often are futures discussed only to secure the present? According to those close to Claressa, she has answered those questions for herself. She has reclaimed her focus, recentered her priorities, and refused to carry guilt for believing what she was told. As this alleged case continues to echo through public conversation, one truth becomes harder to ignore. Emotional damage doesn't always come from cruelty. Sometimes it comes from calculation. And if these claims hold weight, then what happened here wasn't an accident. It was a sequence. A sequence where promises functioned as tools. Where loyalty was assumed but never returned. Where love was spoken fluently, but commitment was never learned. The story doesn't end with closure. It ends with awareness. And in the court of public opinion, that awareness is its own verdict. And now it's on you. Because stories like this don't end when the cameras turn off, they end when the audience decides what silence means. If these allegations are even partially true, then what unfolded wasn't just a failed relationship, it was a calculated emotional transaction that left one side paying the full cost. This isn't about picking teams. It's about recognizing patterns that keep repeating because no one calls them out. If you've ever watched someone promise a future they never planned to build, you already understand why this hurts. If you've ever seen loyalty mistaken for weakness, you already know why the story feels heavy. And if you've ever stayed quiet to protect someone who didn't protect you back, this isn't just celebrity gossip, it's personal. The tragedy here isn't fame or headlines. It's time lost, trust broken, and truth delayed until damage became unavoidable. Some people don't leave with chaos. They leave with clarity. And clarity, when it finally arrives, exposes everything that was hidden behind charm and reassurance. So the question isn't whether this shocked you. The question is whether you recognize it. Drop your thoughts. Say what everyone else is afraid to say. Was this love or was this leverage? Was this romance or was this strategy? Because silence is exactly what allows these stories to repeat themselves with different names and the same ending. If you felt this, don't scroll past it. Engage. Speak. Share. These conversations only matter when people refuse to look away. And if you've been through something similar, know this: believing someone doesn't make you weak. Being honest about it makes you powerful. This story may be labeled gossip, but the emotions are real, the damage is real, and the questions are unavoidable. Stay alert. Stay aware. And remember, not every promise is meant to be kept, but every truth deserves to be heard.